Hello, everyone. Good? Hello? Better? Yes. Okay, perfect. Hello, everyone. I hope you all had a really nice break. Uh, and I was not satisfied with the claps, so can we do one more round of applause? Now that you all had coffee, hopefully? Okay, cool. I'm happy with that. But we can do better. We can do better in the future for the next speaker. Uh, so yeah, my talk for today is cultivating a culture of psychological safety in engineering. I am extremely passionate about this topic, so if you want to chat more after, come find me after as well. So raise your hand. How many of you have felt psychologically unsafe at work? I mean, I'm going to raise my hand too. There are quite a few hands, but I'm sure at some point we felt like we weren't feeling psychologically safe, and that led to us being less productive and a lot of other things that I'm going to talk about today. So, what is psychological safety? Uh, so, let's ask ChatGPT. So psychological safety refers to a shared belief among members. Now, ChatGPT did a pretty good job, and honestly, there were 2 more pages on psychological safety with just this question, what is psychological safety? So I'm going to trim it down here. Psychological safety is the feeling and belief that you can share your thoughts, your feelings, your ideas, opinions, without being punished for it. So our goal, there are 2 goals for today's talk. One is we know what psychological safety is and what it isn't, and we are going to take away with some key action steps that I want you all to take away and start applying at your jobs tomorrow, for example. So my name is Ankita. I'm currently an educator. Previously, I was working in a 9 to 5 up until last year as a senior engineering leader, but I felt like I had a different calling, so I switched to being a full-time educator. I create digital products, and I help developers level up in their engineering careers. So that's basically my mission. And I do that by doing 3 things. One is I build courses, I have a free newsletter, and I also created a YouTube channel because I felt that was really easy for me to do. All the slides are also at bit.ly/refactor23. I'm quite surprised that I got this slug, but yes, that is a easy to remember slug. So if you want my slides, or just in general, you'll be taken to my website. You can find it there. And I also write a weekly newsletter, again, bit.ly/Ankita newsletter, making these slugs easy for all of you all to remember, but I know none of you is going to remember, so come find me after. But yeah, I write a weekly newsletter called Leadership or Front-End Snacks, where I share like bite-sized content as well. So you can learn something new every week because we are all busy every day. So let's get started. So it's a common misconception that we immediately assume that it is just the manager's job to create psychological safety in a team. It's not just a leader or a manager or someone senior in the org. It is also each one of us in this room. We contribute to the team, and we are all responsible for creating a psychologically safe environment. We all know that one team member who just we don't feel included with their behavior or might talk down on us or any of that stuff. I hope you all don't experience that, but we all know that one person at some point in our career that has probably unintentionally made us feel that way. And but it's not just on your manager to fix that problem, it's also on each one of us. So what is not psychological safety? Well, these are some signs to watch out for. No one's going to say that directly up, I'm not feeling psychologically safe. There are going to be these signs, these hidden signs that we're going to have to keep an eye on. The blinds are really funny in this building. So, for example, don't speak up, and they aren't allowed to make mistakes. They feel the fear while making mistakes. They get defensive when you make a statement or even ask questions. They feel like if they show that they're making mistakes, it will get to their performance review, and they will be punished for it, and they might even lose their job, which is not something that you should feel on a day-to-day basis. There's a lot of finger pointing and blaming as well. I didn't do that, it was their fault, or, so on. And there's also like lack of diversity and inclusion as well. When you don't have folks with all different types of experiences and skill levels, then there's also people might start feeling psychologically unsafe because they might think that their specific opinions are not necessarily regarded. So these are some things that you need to keep an eye for as you start thinking about psychological safety. And I want to share a story here. And this was essentially me. When I started my career, I interned at a company, not going to name names. And at that specific company, my manager mentioned that you're not allowed to ask me bad questions. Ask only good questions. And they repeated like 1,000,000 times the same statement. Being a new intern, I wanted to make my first impression, and I wanted to create some sort of a mark in the company. And I kept thinking throughout, what is a good question? I wish ChatGPT existed, but it didn't at the time. But I'm like, what is a good question? And I kept thinking about all the different questions. The next few months, honestly, were really hard on me. Because after work, with friends, everywhere else, I would only think, is this a good question? Should I be asking that? And being in a new company, you can just imagine I've had 1,000,000 questions. And being an intern even, and my first job, like my first professional job, it was even harder. That is a definition of how psychologically unsafe I felt. I did not feel like I could make mistakes. I did not feel like I could ask these questions. And I was being judged by my own manager. That means he's going to give me my co-op evaluation, and that's not going to be good. She doesn't know how to ask good questions, which is not something that I want. But this is exactly how I felt. Now, looking back, since then, in a way, I feel like I'm glad I had this experience because I was introduced to psychological safety very early on in my career. After a few months, I realized that that's not okay, and I started facing my fear and asking questions, even though I was really scared. Later in my career, as I grew more senior, or even in my team, I started building practices to create more inclusivity, and also starting with, no question is a bad question. You can ask me any questions you want. And we all know that, as developers, we want to solve the problems on our own. You don't want anyone to give the answer to you. Okay, cool. So you don't want anyone to give the answers to you. So I would start asking them by asking questions, so to make them think how they could approach the problem. And I think as I grew from a senior developer to an architect, as I grew more and more senior and into leadership, I felt like those practices were even more useful and helpful for not just me, for my entire team. And again, if anyone would say, oh, that's a bad question, I would immediately correct them, because that no question is a bad question. But this is just one example that how psychological safety can play such a huge role in anyone's career. So what are some characteristics of a psychologically safe team? Well, you don't feel afraid to make mistakes like I did. You feel comfortable taking risks and picking up complex tasks. You don't feel like you can just pick up a task, like a Jira ticket of some sort, and you get this help and support you need and not just get punished for it if you get stuck on a problem for a very long time. Your opinions are accounted for, and you feel a valued member of the team. When you ask questions, when you bring up problems, you are actually celebrated, and those questions are answered in a really good manner. You are appreciated for being your authentic self. You can be finally yourself. You don't have to pretend to be someone else. And these are all characteristics of a psychologically safe team. Now, obviously, this is a pretty high bar. It is not going to be possible to meet 100% of these, even though as obvious as it may seem to a lot of us. And that is because, even though I feel like we should still keep this checklist in mind as we create that psychologically safe environment for all of us, because I feel like we'll be able to strive at least closer to it. If we don't have any sort of guidelines, then it would be very difficult for us to get even closer. So keep this checklist in mind and ask yourself, are you feeling it? Have you made someone else feel unsafe as well? Because it can happen with our actions and our emotions. After all, we are all humans. And fun fact is that I was happiest in the jobs in my past decade that I've been working in tech, where I felt psychologically safe. We could ask questions, we worked together as a team, and I was really happy. And I became a high performer in the team as well, because again, I was able to truly be myself. And if you want some stats as well, there was company cultures with a high sense of belonging have seen a 56% increase in productivity and a 50% reduction in the risk of employee turnover. Now imagine in my internship experience, instead of thinking about whether a question is a good question or not, I would actually focus on improving my skills, which I was doing as well, but I feel like a lot of the brain power was gone in thinking whether a question is good or not, or what questions to ask, or write down a list of questions and the possible scenarios. And these are just like things I could be more productive. So these stats I really connect with. So what are some practices that we all can follow? What can you follow moving forward? Well, I think we need to start asking questions instead of making statements. Instead of just making statements, oh, you don't know that, or just using you versus we, and so on, get curious about what's going on instead of jumping to conclusions. Get really curious about your team and bring everyone in. And also assume really good intent as well. And that is the number one lesson that every developer should learn in their careers, that you might think or assume that this person lied or did not have good intent for whatever your past experiences might be. Doesn't matter. Since you never had a bad experience with that specific person, it's fine. You need to start with a clean slate. Assume good intent always. And that is really a foundation of a really good team. And I would say a really good high-performing team. Bring everyone in and make them feel comfortable. In a meeting, we always want to ask questions and bring everyone in. We all are a mix of introverts, extroverts. I'm an ambivert. Sometimes I'm an introvert. Sometimes I'm an extrovert. I got a thumbs up there. That's cool. So you want to make sure that you bring everyone in and make them comfortable, so they don't feel like they need to be someone else, but they have the space to ask questions to do so. And again, create an open space for making mistakes. Admit when you make mistakes. So it can happen that we want to hide our mistakes or hide our flaws, and that leads to finger pointing or blaming. That's totally fine. We are all humans. We are all developers. No one is perfect. Let's work on a resolution now. What is something that we can do moving forward versus what has happened in the past? We can't change the past, but we can change the future. Share your learnings instead of pointing fingers, like I mentioned, because pointing fingers is just not what we do. And lastly, show empathy. You want to be really empathetic, because everyone going through something personal. You have no idea what someone might be going through. And it doesn't matter how they come across, whatever your sort of vision is off for them, that's totally fine. Just make sure that you are empathetic. And for the course of knowledge, let me give you an example. Recently, I launched a course on just helping developers grow into engineering leadership. It's on developer2leader.com, but I ran a workshop for that one. I really prepped and spent a lot of hours on that workshop, because I really wanted that workshop to showcase my skills in terms of how I teach as an educator. In that workshop, there was a lesson on communication as a leader and communication as a developer, and how communication in general. I just took that lesson for granted. I focused on all the other chapters in that workshop, other than the communication part. Turns out in the workshop, communication was the one that resonated the most with people, where people spent the most time on, and I got the most questions. And this is just the example of course of knowledge. For me, maybe communication is easier, right? For me, maybe other topics were a lot harder. But for someone else, that's not true. For someone else, they need that learning experience. They need to learn how to communicate. They want to see how we all can communicate better. And that's just one example of just the curse of knowledge. We don't know what we don't know, and we don't know what we know. And it's always important to show empathy and assume good intent of people. And again, another example was a person on one of my teams was on call and wasn't receiving any pages. This was a weekend, and like 3 in the morning, they got several pages. They totally missed it. And again, 3 in the morning, I see some eye rolls. Yes, and the next day, we did see some impact on our product, and we did lose some customers because the system was not up and running necessarily. Now, in that moment, I was a lead in that team. I could have been like, how could you do this? How dare you do this? Why would you do that? And rather, I instead basically were like, okay, what can we do? Did we miss the pages, or is there a problem? Is the alert too sensitive? How many dollars did we lose? And how can we inform the stakeholders and let's move on and learn from it? Versus telling them, how dare you sleep? How dare you, not wake up at 3 in the morning? And that's just the reality of it, but just especially with PagerDuty. I'm sure we all can relate. But this is just like introducing a postmortem learning hour really helped bring all the problems together, and that developer felt more comfortable sharing those problems, and we came up with solutions together. So any of the solutions that I kind of mentioned wasn't just me. It was my entire team that came and brought solutions to the table, and we kind of introduced it in this next cycle. Over time, we saw an improvement. And that's exactly how you want to be psychologically safe team. You shouldn't feel like they made a mistake, even though it did create some impact on the business. It's about moving forward and looking at what we can do. And allow the room to present ideas without facing the fear of being rejected or failure. So you need to ask a few questions. Does your team feel open to sharing ideas in a meeting? When you kick off a meeting, you want to ask discussion-provoking questions. If you're a lead, your job is to sit back and let the team chime in. Because being in a position of power, you want to make sure that your team is the one that's chiming in and coming up with solutions. Because if you provide a solution, more likely they're going to go with that. So make sure that you keep that in mind as well. Comment good ideas and also not so good ideas, because those not so good ideas will tell you something about a gap in your process or things like that. And again, don't shut down questions and get really curious. So you want to make sure that you do all of these things for creating that psychological safety. And ask their opinion before presenting yours. Let's say you're in a team meeting. You want to make sure that you are essentially asking others' opinions if you have a strong opinion to begin with. Because we all know that the loudest person in the room, sometimes we go with their decision because probably they are the loudest. And that doesn't mean their opinion is true or not. So that's why it's really important that we give, if you are the loudest person in the room, or if you recognize that, which is really good, self-reflection, but if you recognize that, then give someone else a chance, someone more junior to you, to give their thoughts and opinions before we start pressing yours down. Again, you're not going to do that, but I'm just saying, if you have a strong opinion, ask other first, see what your team thinks before sharing yours right away. And avoid passive-aggressive comments. Whether you know it or not, your psychological safety skill set is kind of put to test when shit hits the fan. You have time to think when things are good, but when things are not good, I think that's when we all need to go through sort of a learning process here. This is when you need to be careful and avoid comments. So what you should do when things they should move. It's a GIF. So we can imagine that Schitt's Creek. Does anyone know the character from Schitt's Creek? Who I'm talking about? Who this person is? Okay, he just walks away. Okay, we can just imagine and visualize that. So things you can do is we need to walk away when our emotions are quite running high. Because it's important that you're keeping your emotions in check. Because you might say something you will regret later on, and that's just not going to be good. So things you can do when emotions are high: be careful and avoid passive-aggressive comments. Write down how you're feeling and journal your thoughts. And I'm not asking you to create a bullet journal here. I'm not asking you to journal everything. I'm just asking you that in that moment, instead of saying something, write it down and walk away if you can. Just let your team know that, hey, I'm not feeling good right now. I need some time to think. Is it okay if I get back to you in an hour or half an hour, whatever is well suited and whatever time you need? Sometimes walking away, we all know as developers, bug gets fixed when we walk away. Same idea. Feelings also get better. Start feeling better when we walk away. And a common mistake is that I don't know is a complete sentence. These are a powerful set of words. You can share what you don't know when you don't know something. The senior you get, the more you share that you don't know, you're empowering your entire team to also do the same because they are going to feel like, okay, this specific senior dev or senior person on the team said they don't know. I think it's okay for me to do the same as well. And that again creates the culture. So I don't know is really powerful. And again, we've all been there where we don't have necessarily the full context of the scenario, where we don't know everything. And in that case, you could say, I believe it's this, but I don't know at this specific moment, but let me confirm this and get back to you. Again, you can take your time. And all of these things really put you in a position where you're pausing and reflecting on your decisions and coming back with a better answer. Again, all this adds to you get avoiding and putting yourself in a situation where you don't want to be. And again, the whole cycle starts where you start lying and then blaming, and we all know how human feelings are. And again, be kind and transparent. Your team can sense bullshit. So be kind and transparent. If you need some time to work on any of your personal stuff, if you need some time, you're stuck on a problem for a very long time, just ask for help. You will feel more supported when you ask for help. And also be kind and transparent with your team in terms of what's going on. You'll be surprised with the number of times that people are just going to be so receptive to you and actually offer help and be there for you when you need it. So make sure that you're kind as well and transparent. And just a quick 30 seconds break. For this Refactor conference, I'm giving away the Foundations module of my course for free. So if you want, you can go to /refactor course. And also the barcode here as well. All right. So going back, you want to foster a culture of collaboration and curiosity during code reviews. Now, again, we all know code reviews add stress to an engineer's day-to-day. They are a valuable tool to catch mistakes and bugs early in your code, but they're also a learning opportunity for a lot of us. So you want to make sure that you're fostering a culture of collaboration and curiosity. And I would say that in a developer's life, code reviews add to everyone's stress, add stress for everyone. Just because you get comments, you get defensive, you're really passionate about working on that problem, you have worked on it for hours, and suddenly you get just do this. And you're like, how dare you say just? I've spent millions of hours on this, So things like that, I think code reviews are really important. So again, avoid using you, use we. It is not your code or my code, it is our code, it is our team's code. You gotta shift your mentality there. Ask questions instead of making statements. You wanna comment really good ideas, but also not so good ideas. And again, same point repeats here, don't shut down questions. So here are a few things that I have found very common in code reviews. You wanna use inclusive language during code reviews. And again, like I said, instead of don't make statements, ask. It's a lot easier. Just rename this function. Do you think we could rename this function since whatever? Explain why you did this. Again, it's so defensive. Can you please provide an example and please clarify further? I'm going to also drink water. Not sure why you implemented it this way. Well, what was your thought process like for going for this solution? I asked because this. Again, so much easier instead of saying and making statements right away. And all this to say, inclusive language matters. And this is a really good tweet that I saw on psychological safety, which gives you a list of things that you need to use. My throat, oh my God. Sorry. Yes. So you can follow this tweet as well, just to see a script for things to do and how to say it when you're not a boss. Something's been troubling me, or some of this is not good news, and so on. And learn the recipe to running inclusive meetings as well. Running inclusive meetings is going to be really important for you, especially in the remote world that we are in. Inclusive meetings are really, really important. So if you know how to run them, it will be really good. Again, the recipe would be agenda is shared beforehand so people know what to expect. Let them know if they should present, or if someone is presenting, what the expectations are. Don't exclude people. Keep an open invite. You can invite people, some of the people, but also make sure that you're not excluding people. If anyone can join the meeting, if they would like. If someone wasn't present, fill them in beforehand so they don't feel excluded in the meeting. And ask questions, get curious versus statements. All these are it's a really good recipe for running inclusive meetings, and something that we should all do in general. And a few rules for brainstorming. Again, this specific source is from this website, IDEO, for rules for brainstorming, but I really like this one, wherein you want to defer judgment, you want to encourage wild ideas, you want to be visual, stay focused, and one conversation at a time, and so on. So you could use this for some brainstorming as well. And a method that I really like is use diverge and converge. So again, like we talked about earlier, when there's a person in the meeting that is the loudest, you don't want to just go with their opinion. So you could run, if you can try experimenting and running a mini workshop, our design team, they do that, wherein we can all share ideas, and then we can consolidate those ideas and kind of discuss what's the best idea, especially when you're thinking the future of the product, or you want to brainstorm a new solution to engineering practices, and so on. And again, lead by example. It's extremely important that it's not just your manager or the leaders or just even the senior-most folks in the team are going to go with, building a psychologically safe team. It's also on each one of us to create that psychological safety so we feel like it's a good team environment. Whenever we are happy at work, it also leads to us being psychologically safe as well. So that's all from me. Thank you so much. My slides are at bit.ly/refactor Ankita 23. Yeah, that's me. Thank you.